Lindsay Sterchi, and welcome to Simple Spiritual Practices. In each episode of this podcast, we'll talk about one tangible practice that will help you know yourself and God better. Most of these practices can be done in 5 minutes or less, so you can easily try it out today. If you are ready to experience real growth in your life, or if you want fresh ideas on how to approach your time with God, this podcast is for you. Before we get started with today's episode, I have a couple things I want to make sure that you know about real quick. So first, I'm going to be teaching a class at our church with my husband Tyler on spiritual practices. It's a 4-week online class through Zoom that will be on Wednesday nights starting on February 17th. So in that class, we're going to talk about how spiritual disciplines can help you grow, and we'll also teach you some simple ways to try them out. The class is actually called Simple Spiritual Practices, so if you enjoy this podcast, I think you would get a lot out of this class as well. So if you're listening to this episode when it releases in early February and you want to learn more about this class or sign up, head to newhopechurch.cc/groups and you can find all the info there. So the second thing I want to tell you about is I'm going to start sending out a monthly email letter, and the first one is going out this week. So this is where I'll share some personal updates. I'll talk more about what God has been teaching me lately, and I'll also give some book recommendations and share other resources. I'm also going to include a list of recent podcast episodes in that letter, along with links to the practice guides. So if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, that's a great way to stay connected to that. And I'll only email you about once a month if you sign up for this. So go to lindsaysterchi.com/free if you want to get that letter. Okay, on to today's episode. There have been multiple times this week where I've just kind of felt blah. I've been struggling with motivation. I just haven't felt like doing the things that I know I need to do. And so I end up giving myself any excuse to get out of it. There's always that magical time of later, and I'll get to it eventually. There are days that I just don't feel like doing anything, and sometimes I allow my emotions to determine what I will or will not do. But the thing is, life doesn't allow us to only do stuff when we feel like it. Life keeps going, and it doesn't wait for our motivation to catch up. So we have to figure out a way to do stuff even when we don't feel like it. I still have to feed my kids. I have to meet deadlines and pay bills, whether I feel like it or not. So sometimes I just have to get moving and do the thing I don't want to do. But I also don't want to go to the other extreme and just shut down my heart, ignoring how I'm feeling, to just power through and keep moving at all costs. So here's what I'm learning. It's important to pay attention to my feelings, but I cannot allow them to control me. Because as I pay attention to how I'm feeling and to my level of motivation, there are times when I realize I need to just get moving, to take action, to do the work anyway, and then often the motivation will come as I move. But there are other times that there is a reason that I'm just not feeling it. And the answer isn't to get moving, but to slow down and to take a deeper look at what's going on, because I believe that our feelings and emotions are often trying to tell us something important. So this week I experienced kind of both of these reactions, one where I needed to get moving and the other where I really needed to slow down. So for example, I knew that I needed to do my daily workout. It always helps me feel better and gives me more energy, but I just didn't really feel like doing it. So as I noticed that resistance in me to working out, the answer was pretty obvious. I just needed to get moving. So I did. I kept it simple, but I did something. And you know what? As I got moving, I felt motivation and momentum. I was able to keep going, and afterwards, I felt better. But also this week, I was feeling unmotivated when it came to certain areas of my work and my writing. And as I noticed this, I realized there was a reason I wasn't feeling it. And as I kind of gave it some space and reflection, I was able to see there were some deeper reasons for that resistance that I was feeling. I didn't need to power through and just get it done. What I actually needed was to slow down because that inner resistance was trying to tell me something, that something needed to change. But I never would have seen that had I just powered through. Now, I wish there was a formula that could tell you and me when to get moving and when to slow down. I believe this really takes discernment. But sometimes all it takes is asking ourselves a simple question. Why am I feeling unmotivated? Why don't I want to do anything? Why am I avoiding the things that I need to do today? So some possible answers that I've had are, I'm just tired. I'm physically tired, so I don't want to do anything. Or it might be because I'm afraid that I won't be able to do the work well, or that I'll fail or disappoint someone. Or the answer could be as simple as the thing I need to do just isn't very fun and I'd rather do something else. So whatever the reason, what I'm finding is that most of the time, I generally need to just begin, to simply do what needs to be done. Here's something I'm learning about myself that might be true for you too. Thinking about doing something usually causes me to feel more overwhelmed than actually doing it. As I think about what needs to get done, I'll feel anxious about it, or I waste a bunch of energy trying to convince myself why I can put it off until later. But I found that when I just start taking action, if I would just get moving, the anxiety and feelings of overwhelm begin to get smaller as I prove to myself that I actually can do this. And it's not as terrible or as hard as I had built it up to be in my head. So as someone who does tend to kind of live in my head, who can overthink and overanalyze a thing to death, I personally need to grow in my impulse towards action. Now, what we're talking about today, it's probably going to vary depending on your personality. If you are a more action-oriented and driven person, maybe when you notice feelings of resistance or lack of motivation, what you need more of is to slow down and pay more attention to that. Maybe your area of growth is reflection and allowing your feelings to show you the truth of what's going on in your heart and soul instead of just blasting through your feelings and powering through anyway. So let's think of it this way. When you feel unmotivated or stuck, do you tend to power through or power down? Do you push forward no matter what? Or is your tendency to just kind of check out from life and avoid what you need to do? That is definitely what I tend to do. And knowing this about yourself will help you identify where you need to grow. If you need to slow down before you act, or if you simply need to take action. But whatever your personality type, if you know you need to get something done and you're just not feeling it, most of the time, what helps is to simply begin. Do something. And for me, usually after I begin to move, the motivation will come. I can't wait until I feel like it before I act. Sometimes the best thing I can do is simply begin. So let's talk about a few ideas of how to do that. I want to give you some practical ideas of what to do when you're feeling stuck or unmotivated. Some of these ideas are super practical and others are kind of on a more deep soul level. So here are some simple steps to help you get unstuck. Number 1, notice and name your lack of motivation and ask yourself why. This is such a crucial step. I know we're talking about just get moving, but we can't just rush into action or distract ourselves from what we're feeling without first naming it and noticing it. Notice your lack of motivation, name it for what it is, and then ask yourself why you're feeling that way. This is so important because our feelings, while we don't want them to control us or keep us from acting, they do have something to tell us. So ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Is it simply that you're tired or that what you need to do doesn't sound fun? Are you afraid of doing it wrong or failing? Now remember to, as you do this, invite God to speak to you as you process this question. Ask God to show you what He wants you to see in this. So this is the step where you'll decide if you need to slow down and give those feelings some space, or if really what you need to do is to just get moving. But don't rush past this step of naming what you feel. We don't want our feelings to control us, but we do want to pay attention to what they want to show us. So number 2 is name your first step and then do it. So sometimes we're avoiding something because it feels too big or overwhelming. So just name the very first step and then take it. So as kind of mundane or silly as this sounds, I'll even do this with something as simple as cleaning the bathroom, which I just hate doing. So if cleaning the entire bathroom feels too big or too hard, I'll tell myself to just do one step. Just clean the toilets. That's it. If that's all I do, that's enough. Now, of course, what generally happens is once I do that, well, I might as well wipe down the counters while I'm at it and the mirror, and I usually end up doing more than just that one thing. But instead of looking at the entire bathroom, I just pick the first step and I do that. You don't have to do your entire list or finish the project, but what is one thing you can do to get started? Number 3, focus on creating outer order to give you momentum and energy. So there's times when I'm feeling really overwhelmed by a bigger goal or a project, and it helps to do something with my hands, make a tangible outward change instead of staying in my head. So the other day I was struggling with motivation, so I set aside the writing that I was working on, and I just did a small little house repair that I'd been putting off forever. Then I cleared out some junk that had been collecting in one of our closets. And it's like this simple act of getting really easy things done, even stuff that's just kind of mindless and doesn't feel like a big deal, that built some momentum that helped me have energy and motivation to get to the other stuff. Action often leads to more action. So if you're feeling stuck, try clearing some physical clutter and see if that helps to clear some mental clutter as well. Idea number 4 is set a timer. This is a really practical one that I use all the time, and it's amazing how well it works. So if I don't want to do something, I'll set a timer and tell myself, okay, you just have to do this thing until the timer goes off. I use this trick all the time for writing because the biggest obstacle for me is often just sitting down and getting started. So what I'll do is I'll set a timer for 20 minutes and tell myself, okay, you just have to write until the timer goes off. It doesn't have to be great. You just have to put words on the screen. Do not get up from the chair until the timer goes off. And generally what happens is I get started and then I build momentum. I lose track of the timer goes off, and I'm almost surprised that it's over. So then I keep going. Now there are times, of course, that the timer goes off and I just feel really glad that I can be done. But I can't wait until I get hit with inspiration and motivation to write. It's a discipline and I have to show up and do the work. Now, this idea of setting a timer works really well for kind of those more everyday boring tasks as well. So for example, if you're feeling overwhelmed by a messy house, set a timer for 10 minutes and see how much you can get picked up in that time. You don't have to clean the whole house, just spend 10 minutes and you'll probably get a lot more done than you think. So setting a timer is a really easy way to get yourself moving without feeling like you're taking on this giant thing. Just work on it until the timer goes off. Number 5 is reward yourself when you're done. Okay, so sometimes I'm like a little kid who needs a treat for getting my work done. So I tell myself that after I do that thing that I'm putting off, then I get to do something fun. Then I can pick up my novel or scroll Instagram, but not until I've finished my task. And it's easier to resist those distractions if I just give myself permission to actually enjoy them when I've finished my work. Idea number 6 is to read or listen to something inspiring. So when I'm feeling just that general sense of blah about life, sometimes I need just kind of a pep talk from someone else. And that might come through a podcast or a book that energizes me and reminds me of my purpose. Building these types of things into your life on a regular basis can be really helpful. So if you're feeling unmotivated, maybe some inspiring content from an outside source like a book or a podcast can help you get going. So number 7 is probably the most important step, and that is to give yourself lots of grace and begin again tomorrow. So no matter what happens, what gets done or is left undone, whether you manage to find your motivation and get unstuck, or you just wind up zoning out and scrolling Instagram instead, give yourself grace and begin again tomorrow. Don't let one off day derail your entire week. Celebrate the small wins and the tiny progress. You don't have to be super productive and make things happen all the time because you are human, not a machine, and productivity is not the highest goal. So as you take these steps to find your motivation again and get unstuck, remember, as always, to invite God's voice and presence into this process with you. It takes discernment to know when to slow down and when to simply get moving, and I believe that God wants to lead you in this. I know that I'm going to need to use many of these ideas in the next week or so, and I hope that they help you as well as you try to get unstuck, find your motivation, and live the life that God is calling you to lead. Thanks for joining me today for this episode of Simple Spiritual Practices. If you want to download a free printable for this week's practice or find other resources to help you take next steps, visit lindsaysterchi.com/free. This podcast is part of the New Hope Podcast Network, and production is done by Darren Hansen. You can check out all the podcasts on the network by visiting newhopechurch.cc/listen. Make sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode, and we'll be back with a new episode next week.